X Shore Eelex 8000 center console is unlike any 26-foot sport boat or center console you've ever seen. Her creator, Swedish entrepreneur Conrad Bergstrom, became famous in his country as an innovator, and that's certainly evident in the Eelex 8000. She has a high bow, her transom is open just as are around-the-world ocean racing sailboats. Her bulwarks are also high, and her center console is like that on an American outboard fishing boat. She was purpose-built to handle the offshore waters around Sweden, where conditions can quickly get nasty and her owners have to get home. This sets her apart from many other electric boats that are designed only for lakes and rivers. Her 4-foot 8-inch high bow will keep green water from coming aboard, and just in case it does, it'll immediately flush right out the transom. I think this is probably the safest 26-foot boat I've ever tested. The Eelex 8000's length overall is 25 feet 10 inches. She has a displacement of 5,560 pounds empty and a load capacity of 1,827 pounds. Our test weight, including furniture, modules, and 3 people, was about 6,512 pounds. The battery capacity is like a fuel tank, but it's measured in kilowatts instead of gallons. Our test boat had 2 Chrysler battery packs for a total of 126 kilowatt hours. The boat's electric motor is rated at 175 kilowatts at peak power and 145 kilowatts continuous. She has a 19 by 24 5-bladed prop. What this means is that the X Shore can transfer a lot more torque to the water than a conventional outboard prop because of its added diameter, 5th blade, and greater blade surface. The 5 blades also reduce vibration and noise. The prop pocket reduces draft, and it provides a bit more thrust. She has hard chines, 2 running strakes, and an 8-degree dead rise at the transom to make her more efficient and stable. Her plumb bow and sharp forefoot are important design elements because they slice through waves rather than plow into them like conventional bows. This design also reduces pitching. This is not a new idea, but somehow it's been forgotten by many boat designers for 70 years in recreational boating. The cork composite bow pad protects the boat when docking bow in. Under this deck hatch, there are a lot of technical features that really aren't going to be of consequence to the end user, but they are interesting to know about. So let's pull it and take a look. This exploded animation shows us most of what we're going to see under the deck. Note that her powertrain is forward under the center console helm, and just behind is the drivetrain electronics box, and abaft that are 2 63 kilowatt lithium-ion batteries on the center line. The most obvious component is this big metal drivetrain electronics box, which contains the charger, the inverter, DC to DC converter, and power distribution unit. The power cables come from the drivetrain electronics box directly to the Brusa electric motor. We all know how electric motors work, but what is not so well known is motor RPM reduction by 2 counter-rotating magnetic rings in the transmission instead of gears. This drivetrain eliminates gears, bearings, friction, vibration, noise, and maintenance that comes with them. This reducer has a ratio of 2.84 to 1, which increases the boat's prodigious torque even more. Right alongside the powertrain and directly under the hatch for easy removal are 2 12-volt house batteries. Behind these batteries is an expansion tank for the lithium-ion battery cooling system. The drivetrain cooling system is separate and runs fluid through the raw water heat exchanger, then through both the electric motor, the reducer, and through components in the drivetrain electronics box. Note the hoses are all single clamped, and note the torque marks on all bolts. Now let's find out how all this performs. Here's our performance grid for the Eelex 8000 test. Instead of picking up our top speed and best cruise as we usually do, let's take it column by column because there are some new data points you need to know about when considering an electric boat. First is RPM. We started our test at 200 RPM, going quite a bit lower than the 600 or so RPM that we see on most internal combustion engines at idle. Then we took data readings every 200 RPM until we got to 1660 RPM, which was wide open throttle. This is the lowest RPM we've ever tested on a boat at top speed. Top speed of the Eelex 8000 was 33.5 miles per hour, turning 1660 RPM for an endurance of 39 minutes going 22 miles. The most economical planing speed was at 1200 RPM, where we recorded 22.5 miles per hour for a range of 29 miles and a duration of 1 hour and 16 minutes. The slowest speed we recorded, but you can't go slower, at 200 RPM, we were going 3.25 miles per hour, burning just 1.98 kilowatts. At that speed, you'll go 189 statute miles, and all of our range and endurance numbers are calculated on the basis of a 90% battery charge with a 10% reserve left to get home, but more about that later. With the typical control levers on virtually every boat, moving the throttle just slightly forward or back is imprecise, and we often have to just tap the lever to get it to where we want because of the length of your arm and of the lever. With X Shore's control knob, You can use your whole hand to precisely increase or decrease kilowatt usage. This is an important feature. Another safety feature is that if someone comes along and bumps the controller forward, the boat won't lurch forward. The only way to apply power is for the controller to be in neutral and the power button pressed. A kilowatt is the energy it takes to power 10 100-watt light bulbs for 1 hour. Now let's convert kilowatts to horsepower. 1 horsepower is 746 watts or 0.746 kilowatts. At 200 RPM, the boat used 1.98 kilowatts or 2.65 horsepower to move at 3.25 miles an hour. As we look down the column, we see the kilowatts climb rapidly to peak power, which consumes 170 kilowatts in our test. Multiply that by a factor of 1.34 and you find the horsepower, which is 228 horsepower. Now let's look at how to apply these kilowatts or horsepower. Think of these 3 buttons as a 3-speed gear shifter, but instead of different gear ratios, X Shore limits kilowatts. This is an important safety protocol to make sure you're using power with forethought. Starting with power of silence, you can see that consuming about 6 kilowatts of power drove the boat about 6 miles per hour. I also like to refer to this as docking mode. When you move this controller forward, there's a lot of torque going on, so it lurches forward. And you don't want to have that happen at the dock. So what you do is you put it into the power of silence mode, dock mode, and now things are much more manageable, much more easy to deal with. Remember, as soon as you take it out of the detent, it's engaging the drive. The cruiser setting will limit kilowatts burned to about 87 kilowatts and speeds of 22 miles per hour or less, depending on conditions. And Speedster will be in the range of 150 to 170 kilowatts, going about 30 to 32 miles per hour. Since conditions and the weight of the boat will be different on every outing and in every test, these numbers are only representative of our test with a crew weight of about 615 pounds in flat water. Now we come to torque. Torque is another measurement that we haven't reported on before. Torque is the measure of force that it takes to rotate an object around a shaft. X Shore's large prop is able to harness the tremendous torque coming from the drivetrain and turn it into thrust. The most dramatic test of torque is starting the boat from a dead stop to full throttle. Our test of acceleration from a dead stop was impressive for a 6,500-pound boat. Note our acceleration times. Kilowatts per mile is just like gallons per mile. It tells you how much of your fuel you're burning through per mile. At 600 RPM, going nearly 8 miles per hour and using 2.25 kilowatts an hour, you can go 50 miles. This column shows how many miles you can go for each kilowatt burned. As you can see, over 10 miles an hour is about the same, so if you're in a hurry to get somewhere, say 10 miles away, you might as well go 30 miles per hour and get there in 20 minutes rather than taking an hour going 10 miles an hour. You'll burn through about the same number of kilowatts. The people who care most about range are anglers wanting to go far offshore. At this point, the X Shore Eelex 8000, or any other electric boat, is not for them. However, in places like the east coast of South Florida, where the fish are biting just a few miles off the coast, anglers can troll all day in an Eelex 8000 and rig the boat for serious fishing with its modular design and never be far from home. Truth be told, most operators of small boats don't go too far from home. The NMMA says that the average boat owner uses a boat less than 25 days a year, and boat clubs tell us the average number of miles a day driven is from 8 to 10. Here the X Shore is going out an inlet, and pay close attention to her bow as it cuts through the lumps. She easily rides along, and her plumb bow cuts right through the waves with little fuss. Here we see the Eelex 8000 going the speed it was made for, about 6 miles per hour offshore. As you can see, with her high freeboard forward, she's dry and not taking any spray. Our 35-foot conventional photo boat was another matter. Look at how much water this boat was throwing at the same speed. The X Shore calmly rides over and through the waves, doing no pounding at this speed. The folks at X Shore were kind enough to send us this video taken in blustery conditions that look like 18 to 20 knots on the nose. Note how the bow cuts through the swells with water flying straight up rather than out because the bow is not pounding into the waves. I've driven some fun boats before, but this is a fun boat to drive. Most impressive is how spunky it is when you start moving this controller forward. It just jumps into action and up on plane. It's really exciting to drive. I've been on this all day now doing hole shots, running speed runs. We're still only at 60% battery, so it's just not really draining a lot. There's a lot of endurance going on here. I can have fun all day on this boat without having to worry about it. Going through chop, not finding any problem whatsoever. There's no pounding, no hull slap. At least on the small chop that we've been going through,
5-bladed prop and not a big rudder, so I was expecting a lot less responsiveness for the turning characteristics, but it surprised me. She comes around nice and smartly and in a small area. We were in a narrow channel when I was doing speed runs back and forth. At the end of the channel, coming right around in almost her own length without adding much power to it.
Going out the inlet where it's often the roughest, at 24 miles per hour, note that there's absolutely no spray coming aboard or even visible. Now we're going 32 to 33 miles per hour, the boat's top speed in moderate offshore conditions. I ran the boat for 5 minutes and not see any drop off of speed. Now we're back down to 25 miles per hour, and note that the boat simply does not throw water out to the sides, but rather cuts through it. Now, one concern that some people may have about electric boats is their range on a single charge. Well, X Shore has a solution for that, and you can put your mind at rest. No matter how fast or slow you run the boat, when you get down to a 10% charge, it automatically goes into range extender mode. That limits the kilowatt output, which will give you a range of about 10 miles to get back to port, which is farther than most people use their boats in the first place. How many electric cars have you seen on the side of the road out of power? It just doesn't happen much because their drivers are careful and they know where the charging stations are. Likewise, when driving any electric boat, you have to be mindful of how much fuel you have left, just as any other boater does. For boats, there are two kinds of charging, fast charging and slow charging. Fast charging, like the 40,000 fast chargers Tesla has in 4,500 locations, will take an hour or two depending on how low the battery is. Slow charging, with 240 volts, can take 4 to 10 hours to charge a typical electric car battery according to the U.S. Department of Transportation. X Shore uses the standard automobile plug and has adapters. Between automobile chargers, marina shore power, and even home 240-volt charging, there are plenty of places to charge once proper equipment is in place. Norway has led the charge, so to speak, on installing dockside superchargers, but Canada is hooking up as well. Last year, Safe Harbor, the largest marina operator in the U.S., bought 8 X Shore Eelex 8000s for their marinas. Virtually all of them have 240-volt 50-amp shore power, which will fully charge an X Shore overnight. In fact, nearly all marinas that cater to cruising boats have 240-volt shore power, and that's all you need. Like the Tesla, the X Shore is about more than just the boat. It's about coming to terms with the future of the planet and taking care of it, so our children and grandchildren can continue to enjoy it as we have. X Shore is making a bold statement that all can see and is leading the boating industry into sustainable boating. She's also got some excellent features of note, but that's in another video. Be sure to look for it. For now, this is my full performance evaluation of the Eelex 8000 from X Shore. For BoatTEST.com, I'm Captain Steve. We'll see you on the water using sustainable power.